On the 22nd of February 2026, Mexico's most wanted man and the leader of the feared drug cartel was killed during a security operation. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, known as El Mencho, died midway as he was taken from Tapalpa, Jalisco to the capital Mexico City after being injured in clashes between his supporters and the army. The military operation triggered violent retaliation across multiple Mexican states. Jalisco New Generation, or CJNG, drug cartel members set vehicles on fire, blocked highways and caused widespread panic. El Mencho's death marked Mexico's most significant victory in its anti-cartel campaign. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has expelled more than 100 convicted drug kingpins to the US to appease rising demands from Donald Trump, who pressured Sheinbaum to allow American military forces in the fight against drug gangs. So far, Claudia has rejected direct US involvement but has strengthened bilateral security and intelligence cooperation. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump made a cryptic post on social media platform Truth Social and wrote, "We are winning too much. It's just not fair." So was Trump involved in the killing of Mexico's drug lord? Who is the top drug cartel leader killed in Mexico? What is CJNG cartel, Mexico's major drug trafficking player? Where do cartels acquire their firearms from? And how serious is the fentanyl crisis in America? We explore these questions and more on Beyond Wide Angle this week.
Lo más importante, proteger a toda la población, proteger a la gente.
The most important thing is to protect the entire population, to protect people, to protect the public, to protect businesses, and so on. And that's what was done yesterday throughout the whole day.
Hizo ayer, durante todo el día, a lo largo de todo el día.
One of the world's most wanted drug traffickers, the Mexican cartel boss known as El Mencho, was killed by Mexican security forces. The drug lord, whose real name is Nemesio Ruben Oseguera Cervantes, was killed on the 22nd of February in the western state of Jalisco, along with at least 6 alleged accomplices. The 59-year-old was the leader of a gang that in recent years had become Mexico's most powerful and notorious criminal organization called the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. El Mencho's killing caused an immediate outbreak of disorder across the region he ruled, displaying his huge influence across Mexico and other parts of Latin America. The unrest forced the US and Canadian airlines to cancel dozens of flights. Air Canada announced it was suspending flights to Puerto Vallarta due to an ongoing security situation and advised customers not to go to their airport. Eyewitness footage from Guadalajara International Airport showed travelers waiting after flights were delayed or cancelled.
We're smoky.
For the 28-year-old American traveler Natalie Belusia, a week-long trip to Mexico was expected to be relaxing. But it soon became a nightmare after security concerns in parts of Mexico left her under lockdown at her resort. Belusia said resort guests were told not to leave the property under any circumstances, leaving her feeling confined and uncertain about what comes next.
It's definitely really scary. I hope that it ends soon. This is supposed to be like a vacation, a sanctuary where everything is peaceful. And then now it's like I'm currently in a war zone. So that is really nerve-wracking. We had to cancel all of our trips that we planned for the next few days. We were going to go on a fishing trip, and we can't do that anymore because we'll be like floating ducks in the water, and it's just completely unsafe. Hopefully this ends soon. I'm not sure when it will, but we've been hearing that it's going to go on for weeks.
Following the news of El Mencho's death, cartel members set fire to businesses and vehicles and blocked highways in more than half a dozen states, paralyzing parts of the country.
Vivimos horas críticas en las que se atendieron incidentes en distintos.
We experienced critical hours in which incidents were addressed in different parts of the state and the metropolitan area. Coordination between various agencies at all levels of government was key. The main objective on this day has been to safeguard the safety of the people. Therefore, early this morning, from this security meeting, which is in permanent session, we activated Code Red, which remains in effect.
Se encuentra en sesión permanente, activamos el Código Rojo, mismo que continúa hasta este momento.
Police patrolled the capital streets as residents expressed fear and concern.
Bueno, pues una situación.
Well, it's a situation. On one hand, it's definitely a strong blow to organized crime. However, we also have to recognize that the damage they cause us as citizens is huge. For example, there are curfews, buses being burned. It's really unfortunate what's happening, and we hope the authorities soon take control of this situation.
Hay toques de queda.
Well, the truth is, the whole situation that's happening is very serious. Unfortunately, it's not the first time we're experiencing this, but this time it does seem a bit more worrying because there's no successor to these cartels. And well, we hope that truly our president does something for us, protects us, because honestly, fear is everywhere on the streets. I'm coming to work, and the truth is I come from the state of Mexico, and it's very concerning that something could happen to me on the way, on the highways.
Even in the city of Jalisco, people are concerned about the security situation following the Druglord's death.
Insecurity, for example, I live just up ahead and there's only one store open. The Guadalajara pharmacy is closed, right? And there are lines to buy things. At the butcher's, there's a huge line too. Everything is closed. People are afraid.
I hope things are going to get better, that there will be more support from the federal government so that there's more security here, both in Jalisco and in the neighboring states.
In Mexico, at least 25 members of the National Guard military police were killed in retaliatory violence in the state of Jalisco after the killing of a drug lord. According to Mexico's defense ministry, Mexico has sent 2,500 soldiers to the west of the country to bolster security.
In Jalisco, 6 attacks were recorded in which 25 members of the National Guard, a prison guard, and an officer from the State Attorney General's office sadly lost their lives. At the hands of these cowardly criminals, a woman lost her life. 30 members of organized crime, 30 criminals, were also counted among those who lost their lives in these attacks.
So we're here just outside of the Mexican state of Jalisco's capital, Guadalajara, which was marked by a surge of violence yesterday following the capture of one of the most feared cartel leaders in the country. The Cartel de Jalisco Nueva Generación, responded incredibly violently and burned buses and other vehicles like this, basically blockading roads and bringing the state and many other Mexican states to a standstill. Now, this capture was part of larger efforts by the government of Claudia Sheinbaum to crack down on cartels and effectively offset pressures by the Trump administration. But it's not provoking concerns by many people that this could produce another wave of violence in the months leading up to the World Cup that is being hosted in Mexico, the US, and Canada.
So who was El Mencho, the feared cartel leader killed in the military operation? He was considered as one of the handful of names that have had a huge impact on the history of Mexican organized crime. Born in July 1966 in the western state of Michoacán, El Mencho later moved to the United States. According to the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, he was involved in drug trafficking from the 1990s. In 1994, he was convicted in California for conspiracy to distribute heroin and served 3 years in a U.S. prison. After he returned to Mexico, El Mencho worked as a police officer in the western state of Jalisco, but soon resumed his criminal activities, building his influence in the shadowy world of narcotics. He formed and led the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or the CJNG, which was considered Mexico's most powerful cartel boss since Sinaloa kingpin Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, who was arrested in 2014. And not just Mexico's El Mencho, soon became one of the world's most wanted fugitives, with the United States alone offering a $15 million bounty for information leading to his arrest. El Mencho had a long career in brutality before forming the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. He served as chief of hitmen, or key enforcer, for the Milenio Cartel before overseeing security and operational violence for the famed Sinaloa Cartel, whose former leader Guzman is serving a life sentence in a U.S. prison. Reportedly, CJNG emerged in the 2010s from the remnants of the Milenio Cartel. His leadership benefited from the collapse of the Sinaloa Cartel after the extradition of its leader, Guzman, to the U.S. Subsequent battles between warring factions in Sinaloa ultimately tore the group apart. The New Generation Cartel was to dominate a significant portion of the fentanyl trade after the fall of El Chapo's sons. One of them, Joaquin Guzman Lopez, handed himself in to the U.S. authorities and brought down his group's biggest rival, Ismael Almeo Zambada, with him. El Mencho was a clear beneficiary of the vacuum and the dramatic sequence of events in Sinaloa. CJNG is heavily involved in the production and trafficking of methamphetamine and fentanyl, with links to suppliers in China, and controls several seaports for importing chemicals. The cartel is a key supplier of illicit fentanyl to the US, reaping billions of dollars in profit, as well as being one of the main suppliers of cocaine, according to the Drug Enforcement Administration. The group has contacts in over 40 countries, including the Americas, as well as in Australia, China, and Southeast Asia, according to the US State Department. The US designated CJNG as a terrorist organization in February 2025, and El Mencho had already been indicted multiple times in US, including being charged in 2022 with conspiracy to manufacture and distribute methamphetamine, cocaine, and fentanyl for importation into the US. Mexico had been under pressure from US President Donald Trump to do more to limit the flow of drugs to the US. On the 11th of February, the Mexican Navy released footage of its members unloading seized cocaine as part of a coordinated operation with the US Coast Guard in the Pacific Ocean. The operation resulted in the seizure of 188 packages containing cocaine. A U.S. defense official told Reuters that a new U.S. military-led task force specializing in intelligence collection on drug cartels played a role in the Mexican military raid. The Joint Interagency Task Force Counter Cartel, which involves multiple American government agencies, was formally launched in January 2026 with the goal of mapping out networks of drug cartel members on both sides of the U.S.-Mexico border.
Good afternoon. Good to see all of you.
In a statement, Trump's press secretary Caroline Leavitt said that Washington provided intelligence support to the Mexican government to assist with the operation. On the 23rd of February, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said that American forces did not participate in the operation and insisted the mission was planned and carried out solely by Mexican federal forces.
Todas las operaciones se realizan por las fuerzas PDA.
All operations are carried out by federal forces. There is no U.S. participation in the operation. What there is, as we have said here several times, is a great deal of information sharing. The understanding with the United States is based primarily on the exchange of intelligence information. In this case, the U.S. government provided information and even issued an intelligence statement, but the entire operation, from planning onwards, is the responsibility of federal forces, in this case, the Ministry of National Defense.
Es responsabilidad de las fuerzas federales, en este caso, de la Secretaría de la Defensa.
El Mencho sale. Dejan un grupo con una gran cantidad de...
El Mencho came out. They left behind a group with a large quantity of weapons. It really was a very violent attack carried out by the organized crime personnel, and the military special forces personnel repelled the action. 8 criminals died there in total.
Fallecen ahí en total 8 delincuentes.
A 2023-24 study in the International Journal for Crime, Justice and Social Democracy finds that Mexico's criminal landscape includes roughly 37 large cartels and more than 130 smaller affiliates as of the late 2010s to early 2020s. The 2025 National Drug Threat Assessment recognizes 6 major Mexican cartels. The largest and the most established one is the Sinaloa cartel, which is currently fractured by an internal war. El Mencho's organization, Jalisco New Generation Cartel, known for extreme violence and paramilitary structure and operations extending into Latin America, United States and multiple countries as far as Europe and Asia. Then there is Gulf Cartel, one of Mexico's oldest criminal organizations based in Tamaulipas on the US border. Originally the armed wing of the Gulf Cartel, Northeast Cartel is now independent and operating primarily in Tamaulipas and Nuevo Leon. La Nueva Familia Michoacana is a Michoacan-based organization that emerged from the splintering of earlier groups in that state. Then there is United Cartels, a coalition of smaller groups that formed specifically to resist CJNG expansion into Michoacan. Today, a cartel in Mexico is no longer a single firm like it was in the past. It is now a set of highly militarized networks that control territory as much as they move products. Territorial control of plazas is now essential to a cartel's 2 primary goals: profit and survival. So do cartels rely totally on drugs for profit? Reportedly, cartels for a long time have not relied solely on drugs. Mexican cartels have spent decades diversifying their empires to touch nearly every sector of the economy. It is a fact that drugs remain the foundation, but the business has expanded well beyond. Let's see where all the money comes from. Drugs, which remain the primary source, extortion, fuel theft, human and sex trafficking, arms trafficking, kidnapping, illegal resource extraction, cargo theft, and money laundering. A key component of cartel militarization is also the trafficking of US weapons into Mexico. In 2025, a report claimed that between 200,000 and 500,000 firearms are smuggled into Mexico from America. Those weapons often originate from US manufacturers and are funneled through wholesalers and retailers. In fact, after the Mexican military killed the drug cartel kingpin, Mexican officials detailed the weapons recovered in the firefights. The stockpile included a rocket-propelled grenade launcher, 10 long arms, handguns and grenades. Mexico Defense Minister Ricardo Trevilla Trejo said that as with other Mexican crime scenes, about 80% of the recovered weapons were bought in the United States and smuggled across the border. Gun ownership in Mexico is tightly restricted. Reportedly, there is only one military-run gun store in the country, in Mexico City, where weapon sales are strictly regulated. But access to guns in the US has created what experts called an iron river of firearms flooding Mexico's black market. Statistics from the US Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, or the ATF, back up Mexico's figures, that the vast majority of weapons in Mexico come from the US. The ATF said 74% of the guns used in a crime were linked to an American purchaser from 2017 to 21. Mexico has long blamed US firearms for thousands of deaths in the country each year. The Mexican government in 2021 sued American gun makers, claiming they were aiding and abetting the trafficking of firearms south of the border. In 2025, the US Supreme Court ruled unanimously against the Mexican government in its attempt to hold American gun makers liable for violence and atrocities committed by Mexican drug cartels. Not just the US, China has also been reportedly involved in the Mexican drug trade. Over the last few years, China's presence in Mexico has expanded in both legal and illegal activities. But while legitimate commerce between Mexico and China is growing, Chinese groups are also becoming more engaged in drug trafficking and money laundering in Mexico. Chinese drug trafficking networks continue to be the principal suppliers of precursor chemicals for the production of methamphetamine and fentanyl to Mexican cartels that produce both drugs in Mexico. And Chinese money laundering networks have become the go-to money launderers for the Mexican cartels. From opium cultivation to precursor chemical supply, China has been quietly immersed in Mexican drug trafficking and the narcotics trade for over a century. While El Mencho's death comes as a relief for Mexico, the crisis is far from over. Cartels have survived the fall of every kingpin before him. And this time may be no different, because this is not just Mexico's problem. It is a shared regional issue that requires collective responsibility to dismantle the existing criminal infrastructure. Until such coordinated action is taken, the threat remains palpable. Another El Mencho could emerge to continue the cycle and unleash his ruthlessness.
Delta 1.
Hey, ¿quién habla?
Mira bien, hijo de tu puta madre. Soy Mencho, güey. Relaja tu puta gente a la verga. Soy Mencho, güey. Relaja tus putas partidas. Si no te voy a partir tu madre, tienes toda tu bola de perros. Te tengo identificado 30 güeyes. Hasta tus putos perros te voy a matar si no te relajas, güey. ¿Cómo ves?
Ya está, señor. Ahorita los bajo.
Oh, no cuelgues, hijo de la verga. Te tengo ubicado en Chacala, güey.
No le estoy colgando, le estoy diciendo, ahorita los bajo.
Póngase bien las pilas, güey. ¿Qué se le cuesta ser amigo, cabrón? ¿Uno no se mete con ustedes para que se pasen de verga?
No, señor. Ahorita yo se las bajo.
Pongan, mire, revíremeles a todos los hijos de su puta madre, porque todos agarran dinero y son buenos de puercos.
Sí, es lo que me están diciendo.
¿Se me ponen a tiros o tú eres el primero que vas a marchar por ellos, León?
No, señor.
¿Vale?
No, señor, no se trata de eso.
Váyase a la verga, porque aquí los vergazos están al 220, ya se la sabe. Y miedo no hay.
No, señor, no se trata de eso. Ahorita yo lo sé.
Entonces, si quiere la amistad, aquí va a tener un amigazo, cabrón. Si no, a chingar a su madre a la verga.
No, yo sé, señor.
Ya estoy hasta la verga de que no entiendan, loco.
Señor, usted me conoce, usted sabe que yo soy amistad.
Pues por eso me extraña, cabrón. Yo te entiendo, güey, pero pues no mames, yo sé que tienes gente y la familia y la chingada. Verga, póngase las putas pilas.
Yo lo sé, señor. Nada más
no quiero que me apagues este puto teléfono. Después te voy a marcar, güey. A ver si no se relajaron a la verga, ¿eh?
No, ahorita le voy a marcar.
A todos en general, güey. Relájenmelos a la verga. Por favor.
Ahorita le voy a marcar de otro número a este número que me está marcando.
No, este ya no le vuelvas a marcar. Yo le marco cuando yo pueda.
Ándale, pues.
Pero no me lo apague porque lo voy a entender como negatividad.
No, señor. Ahorita le mando un mensaje de otro número para que no marque el otro.
Órale, pues, Melón. Ahí les espero eso, que se relajen a la verga.
Sí, señor. Usted me conoce. Usted sabe que hay respeto y hay amistad. Nada más.
Ya está, igualmente. De aquí para allá también. Ahí disculpen por las malas palabras.
Aquí los muchachos son los que están allá y ahorita yo se los agrupo.
Ahora pues, ahí le encargo.
Ándale, sí.
Ahí relájenmelos a todos, dígale que va de parte mía.
Claro que sí, señor.
Ya está.
Ándale.
Now that Mencho is dead, who will take over and become his successor? Let's talk about it. Now, Mencho has one son, a person called Ruben Asaguera. However, he is serving life in prison plus 30 years at the ADX Supermax in Colorado currently. We would have to assume that the most likely successor is Mencho's stepson, a person called Juan Carlos Valencia, aka 03. 03's mother is a woman called Rosalinda Valencia. At one point, she was married to El Mencho. His father was a drug trafficker. All his uncles were drug traffickers. And he has known El Mencho for decades, obviously being his stepson. He heads a group called Grupo Elite, which you've probably seen in various videos. They're one of the armed wings of CJNG. He was actually born in California and is only 42 years old. Very connected, very high up, very young. Definitely, for sure, I would assume would be the successor most likely. Now, other people that could take over include a guy called Audias Flores Silva, a.k.a. El Jardinero, a.k.a. the Gardener. He is an extremely powerful regional leader of CJNG. Born in Michoacan, he not only controls areas of his home state, but as well as Jalisco and most of the Mexican state of Nayarit. He controls both economical and operational resources on behalf of the cartel. Keep in mind, he has a $5 million bounty on his head by this country. Another person that will continue to be a major higher up is this guy, a man called Gonzalo Mendoza Gaitan, a.k.a. El Sapo. El Sapo is said to be the plaza boss of Puerto Vallarta, which is a big-time stronghold. Keep in mind, he also has extensive control. And the fact that he controls Puerto Vallarta, which is a tourist destination, he's done a great job, allegedly funneling money through various nightclubs, bars. That money laundering ability is very good, and he's actually been quite trusted. No matter how you slice it, the death of El Mencho is gigantic. In fact, I never thought it would actually happen in terms of him being killed. That said, there are very powerful people that are underneath him or were underneath him. It's anybody's guess. That said, I would assume that his stepson takes over. That said, there's a lot of high-profile people up top. They're still a very high-level drug trafficking organization. In fact, they're one of the biggest in the world.
According to Mexico's defense minister, Ricardo Trevilla, Mexican special forces were able to kill Rubén Oseguera Cervantes after a gunfight, thanks to following his romantic partner, or one of them. You know why shows like Narcos are so good? it's because they're based on real events. And now we're seeing the series of events that also plays like a movie happen before our eyes. This person had been on the DEA's radar for many, many years. There was a $50 million bounty on his head. Both U.S. and Mexican authorities had been trying to track him down and stop him. So Mexican military intelligence was able to track down and start surveilling and following a trusted associate of one of El Mencho's romantic partners. They followed this person to a location in Tapalpa, Jalisco on Friday, who was escorting this romantic partner to meet with El Mencho and spend the night. A Mexican military official said that the exact location was identified thanks to very important additional information provided by U.S. intelligence. And it's worth noting that even though President Trump and President Claudia Sheinbaum could not be further apart politically, ideologically speaking, there has been increased cooperation when it comes to counter cartel operations, especially when it comes to surveillance and intelligence, between the U.S. and Mexico in a task force that was formed and that has been beefed up over the last several months. Okay, back to the woman. The woman spends the night on Friday night. Saturday morning, when she leaves, units from the Mexican Army and the National Guard surrounded the area. They had confirmed that El Mencho had a specialized security detail to protect him. The Mexican Air Force was standing by, and the Mexican President, Claudia Sheinbaum, who was traveling, was kept informed of everything that was going on. Before dawn on Sunday, when it was absolutely confirmed that El Mencho was there in this area by his property or around his property or in his property, they decided to attack. General Trevilla, Mexico's defense secretary, said that the response from the cartel and from the security detail was extremely violent. And yet, no Mexican soldiers were killed. Several were injured, and 8 members of the cartel were killed. El Mencho didn't die there. He was injured along with another person from his crew, airlifted, and allegedly died on the way to a hospital. At this point, the Mexican military who were taking him back to a hospital in Jalisco when he was dead decided, no, let's take him to Mexico City for safety. Suddenly, more than 60 miles west of Tapalpa, a man known as El Tuli, who's allegedly El Mencho's right-hand man, launches a whole aggressive violent operation. He was the one who masterminded all of those blockades that we saw emerged in Jalisco. And this person tells his own soldiers from the cartel that he will pay $1,000 per soldier, Mexican soldier from the Army or the National Guard, that they kill. And that's how more than 24 Mexican National Guard members are killed. At least 1 civilian is killed in Jalisco and a few others. But ultimately, a paratrooper Mexican rifle brigade is able to identify where El Tuli is, and they kill him too. So now you ask, number 1 and number 2 of Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación are dead. Is this the end of the problem? Obviously not. If you've watched Narcos or followed the events that happen after the killing of a major drug kingpin and his close circle, this is not the end. There are succession wars, there are turf wars, and Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación is not the only cartel operating in Mexico. It's also not the end, and I might stress, because it is not the end of the demand for the drugs that empower and enrich these cartels.
From a simple vendor to the most powerful cartel leader in Mexico with a $15 million U.S. bounty on his head, Nemesio Oseguera, known as El Mencho, made headlines after a federal operation ended his life and sparked a wave of violence and road blockades across Mexico. So who is he? And what do we know about this name? El Mencho, 59, led one of the most dangerous criminal networks in the world. He moved tons of cocaine from Colombia through Ecuador to Mexico's Pacific coast using speedboats and submarines. He was known for his military tactics, deploying hundreds of heavily armed, well-trained gunmen, including former Special Forces members from Colombia. Rarely seen in public, he operated from heavily fortified mountain compounds. The U.S. Treasury Department previously described him as the largest cocaine trafficker into the United States, with vast networks involved in fuel theft and cross-border criminal operations. Years of pursuit have finally ended, but the fall of El Mencho does not mean the end of the cartel. Rather, it opens a new chapter in Mexico's long war against organized crime.
A sleek, modern villa was where Mencho Oseguera, leader of the Jalisco New Generation cartel, spent his final hours. Reuters footage shows the home's messy kitchen, with cartons of milk, spoiled strawberries, unfinished pastry, and boxes of produce left on the floor. Bottles of hygiene and skincare products, vitamins, and empty boxes of luxury items were also found inside. There is also a small makeshift altar with Catholic figures including the Virgin of Guadalupe, Mexico's patroness, and St. Jude, the patron saint of lost causes. The two-story villa sits inside the exclusive Tapalpa Country Club, a gated enclave of weekend homes in the hills of Jalisco. Authorities had been led there by a tip tied to Oseguera's lover. Burned-out cars and trucks sat on some of the roads encircling the compound after a siege-like raid by the military on Sunday. Oseguera, better known as El Mencho, tried to escape through the back garden to a wooded hillside but was hit by gunfire during the pursuit. Authorities said he died of his injuries while being airlifted away. Tapalpa has faced scrutiny before. 10 years ago, the U.S. Treasury Department imposed sanctions on several businesses in the area, alleging they were used to launder money for the Jalisco cartel and its financial arm.
Nemesio Ruben Oseguera Cervantes, also known as El Mencho, spent a decade as the most wanted criminal in the Western Hemisphere and remained invisible to the agencies hunting him. He co-founded the Jalisco New Generation cartel around 2010 and built it into a global empire with breathtaking speed, specializing in the drugs of the modern era, methamphetamine and fentanyl. The U.S. State Department designated his cartel a foreign terrorist organization in early 2025. Washington put a $15 million bounty on his head. He survived by trusting almost no one, moving constantly, never photographed, always rumored to be dead, until Sunday. Every intelligence agency on Earth had failed to pin him down. What cracked the case was simpler: a woman's visit to a mountain hideout. On February 20th, Mexican military intelligence, working with U.S. Northern Command, received a concrete tip. A trusted associate of one of El Mencho's romantic partners could lead them to him. The location, Tapalpa, a picturesque colonial town 130 kilometers from Guadalajara, and a vacation compound called Cabanas La Loma, previously sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury for supporting the CJNG. The lover visited El Mencho on Saturday. Then she left, he stayed, and planning began within the hour. On February 20th, Intel confirmed El Mencho's location. U.S. Northern Command provided surveillance support. A 24-hour clock started ticking. On February 21st, the romantic partner met with Oseguera at Cabanas La Loma, confirming his presence. She left, but he stayed with his security detail. The trap was set. On February 22nd, the National Guard's Special Reaction Force closed a perimeter. Troops staged outside Jalisco to keep the element of surprise. Then they closed in. El Mencho's men opened fire with assault weapons and rocket launchers. 8 cartel members died. 2 soldiers were wounded. El Mencho and 2 bodyguards fled into dense woods. Special forces split up to chase them. They found him hiding in the undergrowth, critically wounded but alive. El Mencho and his 2 bodyguards reportedly died en route to the hospital. Later, fighter jet carried the bodies to Mexico City. CJNG, the powerful cartel that El Mencho led, responded immediately. Hundreds of flaming roadblocks went up across multiple states. Grocery stores were attacked. Open gunfights erupted with the military. Schools were shut. Airlines halted flights. The US Embassy told Americans to take shelter. At least 27 members of the Mexican National Guard were killed in 6 separate attacks in a single day. The country held its breath.
It's not possible to get out right now because first, we're not allowed to leave the resort under any circumstance, so we're locked down in the resort. And even if we went out on the streets, the cartel would stop us and force us to get out of the car and light the car on fire. So the whole city is under lockdown. No one is going out because everyone is scared of getting stopped by the cartel. I can't even go home even if I wanted to because New York is in a snowstorm, blizzard. I hope that it ends soon.
President Claudia Sheinbaum, who had authorized the operation partly to satisfy the Trump administration, went before cameras and called for calm. Analysts warn the power vacuum El Mencho leaves behind could trigger a brutal succession war. His son is imprisoned in the US, his wife arrested on money laundering charges, 2 brothers jailed in Mexico. The line of succession, as one expert put it, has been broken. Meanwhile, the rival Sinaloa cartel, already fragmented since El Chapo's extradition, may see opportunity. 4 CJNG commanders are believed to be vying for control. A negotiated transition is possible. So is all-out war between factions. Mexico has felled its most feared cartel king. The achievement is historic, comparable in significance to Colombia's killing of Pablo Escobar in 1993, or the capture of El Chapo Guzman. But history also shows what follows such moments: chaos, fragmentation, and often the emergence of something worse than what came before. The CJNG built its empire on speed, brutality, and adaptability. Its lieutenants are trained in that image. Whether they consolidate under new leadership, splinter into warring factions, or trigger a broader conflict with the Sinaloa cartel will shape the trajectory of drug trafficking and the fentanyl crisis in the United States for years to come. El Mencho is dead in a Tapalpa forest. The cartel he built is still breathing. And Mexico, with the World Cup 6 months away, is watching the mountains of Jalisco for what comes next.
For over 3 decades, no government on Earth could find him. Not Mexico, not the United States, not the DEA with a $15 million bounty on his head. He did not use phones. He communicated through handwritten letters. He moved through the mountains like a ghost, surrounded by an army, invisible to the world. And in the end, it was not a satellite that found him. It was not a wiretap. It was not a drone. It was a woman. A secret visit to a cabin in the mountains of Jalisco. A romantic encounter that was supposed to last one night, became the thread that unraveled 3 decades of invisibility and led to the death of the most wanted drug lord on the planet. But now, in the aftermath, the internet has exploded with a different story. One that points not to the real woman intelligence agencies were tracking, but to a 25-year-old influencer and OnlyFans model named Maria Jalissa, whose life has been turned upside down by a storm of viral lies, AI-generated photos, and fabricated audio clips. Tonight, we untangle the truth from the fiction. Who actually led authorities to El Mencho? Was she a knowing collaborator or an unwitting pawn? And is the influencer the internet is blaming actually innocent? This is the story of how love, betrayal, and disinformation collided in the most dramatic cartel takedown in Mexican history. Let's start with what we actually know, what Mexican authorities have officially confirmed. On Monday, February 23rd, General Ricardo Trevilla Trejo, head of Mexico's Defense Department, stood before the press and laid out the timeline that led to El Mencho's death. The key to the entire operation was not a military breakthrough or a technology innovation. It was old-fashioned intelligence work focused on one thing: the drug lord's romantic life. The woman at the center of the operation is Guadalupe Moreno Carrillo. Her name first surfaced publicly 4 years ago, in October 2022, when the hacker collective known as Guacamaya Leaks carried out a massive breach of Mexico's Defense Department servers. Among the thousands of classified documents that spilled onto the internet was a National Guard intelligence report that mapped the internal structure of the Jalisco New Generation cartel. In that report, Guadalupe Moreno Carrillo was identified as El Mencho's current romantic partner, his girlfriend after his separation from his wife, Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia, who had been arrested for money laundering in 2021. But Moreno Carrillo was not listed as just a companion. The leaked documents placed her in a section titled Regional Coordinators and Plaza Chiefs, suggesting she held an active role within the cartel's operational structure, not just a personal relationship with its leader. No specific functions or territories were detailed, but her inclusion in that category raised immediate red flags within intelligence circles. For the next 4 years, her name went quiet. Until now. According to General Trevilla's account, military intelligence had been monitoring El Mencho's inner circle for months. They knew a critical detail about the most wanted man in the world. He avoided all electronic devices. No phones, no radios. He communicated exclusively through handwritten letters to minimize any digital footprint. He lived in constant motion through the mountainous terrain between Jalisco, Michoacan, and Colima, never staying in one place for long. His paranoia had kept him alive for decades. But there was one vulnerability. Even the most disciplined ghost needs human connection. Intelligence agencies had identified Guadalupe Moreno Carrillo as the weak link. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, military intelligence first detected Moreno Carrillo's movements and began tracking her. For 6 days, they followed her trail. Then, on February 20th, they identified a trusted associate, a man close to Moreno Carrillo, transporting her to a cabin complex in the mountain town of Tapalpa, Jalisco. This was a pre-arranged meeting point. El Mencho was there, waiting with his security detail. On February 21st, Moreno Carrillo left the compound. El Mencho stayed. He remained in the cabin with his armed escort, apparently confident that his location was still secure. That was his fatal mistake. Military intelligence confirmed his presence and began planning the assault. A 3-pronged operation was designed, with ground forces, an aerial component with 6 helicopters, and a special operations unit. On the morning of February 22nd, they moved in. The rest, the firefight, the chase through the forest, the helicopter evacuation. The death in mid-flight is now history. The woman who unwittingly revealed his hiding place had already left. She was gone before the first shot was fired. Now here is where the story takes a bizarre and disturbing turn. Within hours of the Defense Department's press conference, when authorities said that a romantic partner had been key to locating El Mencho, but provided no names, the internet did what the internet does. It filled the void with speculation, conspiracy theories, and outright fabrication, and it landed on a target, Maria Julissa. Maria Julissa is a 25-year-old influencer from the state of Sonora. She is known on social media as the Baseball Barbie, a content creator who posts about baseball, cars, and lifestyle content. She also creates adult content on OnlyFans. She has a public relationship with another well-known influencer and streamer called Mr. Steven TC. She has absolutely nothing to do with the Jalisco New Generation cartel. But none of that mattered. Viral posts on Facebook and X began claiming that the Mexican government had confirmed that El Mencho's capture was made possible by tracking Maria Julissa, described as one of his companions who was allegedly involved in money laundering. The posts spread like wildfire. Then came the images. Photographs allegedly showing Maria Julissa embracing El Mencho at a nightclub, and even one showing her wearing a bulletproof vest with CJNG insignia. There was a fabricated audio clip in which she supposedly celebrated the Druglord's death, and most chillingly, another audio clip allegedly of El Mencho himself recorded during the military assault, blaming Maria Julissa and ordering his men to kill and dismember her. All of it, every single piece, appears to be fabricated. The photos show signs of artificial intelligence manipulation. The audio clips have not been verified by any authority. No Mexican government agency, including the Defense Department, the Attorney General's office, or the Security Ministry, has ever mentioned Maria Julissa in connection with the investigation or the operation. The influencer responded on Instagram stories, visibly shaken. She denied any connection whatsoever. She described the claims as completely false. She pointed out that it is now incredibly easy to edit photos and create fake content with artificial intelligence. She asked her followers to report every account spreading the misinformation. She emphasized that she would never involve herself in anything related to drug trafficking, and that she likes to keep the peace. But the damage was already done. Her name became a trending topic. Millions of people now associate her face with the fall of the most powerful drug lord in the world. In a country where cartels have a documented history of killing people based on social media rumors, the consequences of this viral lie could be far more than reputational. So what do we actually know about Guadalupe Moreno Carrillo's role? Was she a deliberate informant? Or did authorities simply follow her without her knowledge? The official account from General Trevilla is careful. He said the intelligence operation involved tracking Moreno Carrillo's movements, not that she provided information voluntarily. The wording points to surveillance, not collaboration. She was followed to the cabin. She met with El Mencho. She left. He stayed. The military moved in. At no point did the Defense Department describe her as an informant or a cooperating witness. However, the circumstances raise uncomfortable questions. Moreno Carrillo was listed in classified intelligence documents as part of the cartel's organizational structure. She is now considered a fugitive by Mexican authorities, who believe she may have accompanied El Mencho during his years in hiding. The fact that she was already identified in the Guacamaya leaks 4 years ago means intelligence agencies had her on their radar long before this operation. Some media outlets have speculated she may have been cooperating with Mexican or even American authorities, that her visit to the cabin was not coincidental, but part of a deal. Others believe she was simply under surveillance and had no idea she was being tracked. The truth remains unknown. No formal charges have been filed against her. Her current whereabouts are unclear. There is also the broader question of U.S. involvement. President Scheinbaum said no American forces participated directly in the operation, only intelligence sharing. But multiple reports indicate DEA was involved in the intelligence chain that identified Moreno Carrillo's movements. The fact that military intelligence first detected her on Valentine's Day, a full 8 days before the operation, suggests sustained surveillance that required significant resources and possibly international cooperation. What we're left with is a story that is both ancient and disturbingly modern. The most powerful drug lord in the world, a man who evaded capture for over 30 years by rejecting all technology and living like a 19th century fugitive, was ultimately undone by the most human weakness of all, the need for companionship. He avoided phones, satellites, and digital surveillance, but he could not avoid wanting to see the woman he loved. One visit, one cabin in the mountains. That was all it took. And in the aftermath, the internet created its own parallel narrative, pinning the blame on an innocent 25-year-old influencer with AI-generated photos and fabricated audio, demonstrating just how dangerous disinformation has become in the age of artificial intelligence. In a country where cartels kill based on rumors, that viral lie is not just irresponsible, it is potentially lethal. Guadalupe Moreno Carrillo remains in the shadows, her role still unclear, her location unknown, her story untold. Maria Julissa is pleading for the internet to stop spreading lies that could cost her everything. And somewhere in a government vault, the full classified file on how they finally found the ghost of Jalisco sits in a folder the public may never see. The ghost is dead. But the questions about who really led the hunters to his door are only just beginning.
Smash that like button, hit that subscribe button. Most definitely, I told y'all, we own it. We own it. This is the channel where you want to come to get all your news and information about the Mexican drug cartels. Everything what you need is right here at S.L.R Media TV. So, the lady right here with the CNG that bulletproof vest on with El Mencho, they saying that she was the one El Mencho up for the $15 million, and it was a work in progress. Did she set him up, or did she not even know that she was being set up to bring down the biggest drug cartel boss in the world, El Mencho? Smash that like button, hit that subscribe button. We're gonna get more in depth. We most definitely gonna break this down. We most definitely gonna get to the bottom of it. It says she on the run. Is that true? We don't know, but we're gonna look it up. We're gonna find out. We most definitely gonna find out more about this chick right here that allegedly was already in a relationship. So she would double dab dipping on both sides. She fucking with a cartel boss that got billions. So of course the regular dude was gonna be on the outs. But they're saying that she was the one that led them to Mencho. So most definitely tap in. Most definitely tap in. Part 3 will be coming. We most definitely break it down more and we package it up and ship it out accordingly. And we most definitely going to find out who was the one that gave El Mencho up, or was it her? And we also going to find out who will be the successor of CJNG. Like, subscribe, share, comment to my YouTube channel. You know what to do. Hit that subscribe button. Share the live. Share the channel. Support the channel. Let's get 100 likes on this video. I'm out. Peace. Make sure you get it in that Cash App too. $SRED40.